All right. Well, friends, thank you so much for joining us today. I've asked Tommy Dinkins, who I think, Tommy, you've been doing short sale and foreclosures as long as I've been in real estate. I feel like you've been over at Weeks in Irvine, and anybody that's new in the business, I would say within the last 10, 12 years may not have exposure to many short sales and foreclosures and how they operate. But the realistic thing is that people bought at a high point of the market, and even though it's even with low interest rates, still sometimes things shift, challenges happen, and that's where I think we're probably going to see some increase of short sales and foreclosures. And when I asked Tommy about it, you said yes, you're starting to see some more come across your desk.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll say, I mean, maybe not 10 to 12 years. I would say 10 or less. If they've gotten into business in the last 10 years, then yeah, maybe they've been blessed to not have a short sale. But I'd say if you creep into the 12-year plus, they have some nightmare stories they could probably share. And if anybody hops on and has one, I have plenty. But yeah, they are. So, when it was crazy in 2009, when the bottom dropped out and it stayed that way for the next 10 years, they were 60% of the nation. And now, thankfully, it got stronger and stronger. And then there was more demand for homes than there were buyers. And so obviously there was the shift, and the market improved in that way. Now, just like you said, Roni, it's kind of shifting slightly. Are we ever going to see what we did before? No. I mean, the issues before were subprime. I mean, they were giving mortgages, no doc loan mortgages to people that didn't have jobs, So of course that's going to plummet to the earth and not do well. But then nobody knew what they were doing. It was a mess. It was like the wild, wild west. Now they don't do those kinds of loans. So are you going to see a ton of them? No, but I have a lot more now than I've had in the last 2 years combined. I have more files at one time now than I've had probably total in the last 2 years. So that to me says a lot. Absolutely. It's this during this time here, I'd say since the last maybe 6 months, the calls have started to come in, not just from people wanting to do presentations and educate the newer agents, but also people that have short sale situations, and they call me in a panic and they're like, someone told me to call you. I've never done this before. I've never seen a short sale. What do I do? And yeah, so this is good timing for you guys.
And so as a realtor, sometimes I'll get a call, especially if I've sold them the house, right? Or if somebody's referred them to me and they say, we want to sell, but I don't know that we can capture. I think we're going to be short. My first response is send them to Tommy and let him talk through that scenario. And so you've got to be counseled in a way that it's in a professional manner where it's going to help them navigate and be educated through the process. So thanks, Tommy, again for coming on, educating us, and we are recording this so that we could share it out with many others and hopefully find lots of value in it. So I'm just going to let you kind of turn loose. Now, one thing that Tommy and I were talking about is we want it to be conversational. So at any point you have a question, just raise your hand or jump in and ask it. So it's not as presentation style as it is more conversational. All right.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's how I do presentations in person too. So if you guys want to unmute and speak, if you're in a place where you can turn your videos on so I can see your faces, oftentimes I'm stuck behind my desk like a gremlin and I don't get to see your faces. So if you're in your PJs, keep the regular face. But if you can turn your cameras on and you're in a safe place, you're not driving and living the crazy agent life, and do it. I'd love to see your faces. But yeah, feel free to unmute yourself. It's completely casual. I was telling Roni, I've never learned anything good by being preached at. I don't like it. And this is a situation where it happens this way with you and I. So, when you come to me in that panic going, oh my God, I think I have a short sale. It's not just the Tommy show. You guys got to be here with me doing your part so that it gets to the finish line successfully. So what I'm going to do, and this is the part where you guys unmute. So I'm going to ask you a question, and I want anybody, there's no wrong answer here. The question to really start the whole thing is, what happens when you get a listing appointment? So let's say that you have a listing appointment in a couple of days. What do you do? How do you prepare for that? Anybody can speak up.
I mean, the first thing that I'm doing is preparing comparative market analysis to see what's happened in the last 12 months.
Mhm. Yep. So pull comps basically is what you
Yeah.
do. You have to have an idea when you go on that listing appointment what you're going to tell that seller. Here's where I think your house is, or the range. You got to have an educated idea of where you're going to list it if they hire you, right? Anybody else? What else do you do?
Looking at the CRS tax map to get the history on the house, when they bought it, who they bought it with, and see if they've taken out any other loans or refinanced and so forth.
Yeah.
History on the mortgage.
Awesome. Yeah, absolutely. You got to know what you're walking into. Anything else?
Preparing a net proceeds sheet so that we have realistic expectations, finding out what the transfer fees are, finding out like Ricardo said, getting those additional pieces of information of second mortgages or anything like that, so we have a full picture of where they're standing when we sit down, and then can really find out what they're going to net afterwards.
You guys are nailing it. Absolutely. Anybody else? Those are all exactly right. What else you got?
One thing that I do is when I'm sitting at the table with them, I will ask them, have you financed anything else? Solar panels. Gosh, I've had people, do HVAC units and they've like financed them through Dominion Energy or whatnot, and that's got to be paid off at the time of closing. So it's surprising sometimes what people will finance against their house. Do they have any outstanding HOA liens that they're familiar with? Man, we've been faced with some of that. That's really thrown us into a short sale position. Didn't realize it. They didn't disclose it. Whether they knew about it or not, they didn't disclose it until much later in the process. So just asking, what else could we have those expenses coming from?
Asking questions, 100%. So I'll just jump in because you guys are hitting it all. Obviously the comps. I mean, Allison, of course, you got to pull comps. And then the questions, Roni, and then I think who else mentioned, pulling the taxes. So there's a way. You guys know that Weeks in Irvine will do a lien search for free. Do you guys know that? We do lien searches for free. We have abstractors on staff. I mean, as long as it's in Charleston, Dorchester or Berkeley County, that's where our abstractors are working. So as long as they're in the 3 counties, then we can do it. Now, if it's outside, that costs us money. So obviously it can't be free. But yeah, we'll do a free lien search for you. So bam, if I were to go on a listing appointment, now again, I'm not an agent. You guys are the pros there, but I would do exactly that. I would pull comps on that call when I make the appointment. Let's say it's 2 days from now. I'm going to ask them to order a full payoff from the bank, not a mortgage statement, a full payoff from the bank. It's usually free. If they're online savvy, then they can probably pull it within minutes. If they're not, they can make a phone call. It can be faxed or emailed to you or to them, however they want to receive a copy of it. Get a full payoff in writing. It is not the same as a mortgage statement. That also has thrown people into a short sale. So the numbers, especially if they're not paying their mortgage on time, the numbers of late charges, you can't just add that to the principal payoff. It doesn't work. That doesn't work like that. My dog is coming to say hello. So what you have to do is get that full payoff in writing. No, you're not going to have that before the listing appointment. That's where all this other stuff is going to come in. But you will be so prepared. Allison, I think you're the one who said a net sheet. Yeah. So you will be so prepared by the time you get in front of them that you already will know as soon as you have that payoff statement, which it should only take the seller a couple of days if they do what you ask them to do. Then when you have it and you look down at your documents, you're going to know right away if it's either close or if it's definitely a short sale or if you got plenty of room and there's no worries. So I'm going to pull comps. I'm going to get a lien search done. So I know. And so that goes into, Roni, there's those nightmare stories where you have UCC liens. Those are the HVACs that they attach to the property, and you can get them from the utility company. And people, in their defense, you and I were in the business, so we know that's clearly a mortgage. People don't know that home equity lines of credit are mortgages. They use it like a credit card, and they don't realize that it's money against their equity. they completely forget, or they just don't know. UCC liens, they think it's a debt that it's like a loan that they just make a payment to. They don't realize it's attached to the home where the materials or the mechanicals are placed. So there's so much unknown that they don't do this for a living. They do something else for a living. Like I don't want to know what a dentist does in somebody's mouth, right? And so a normal consumer doesn't want to know, what a lender is doing. They just know they need something. So the lien search is going to come back and show you that. The lien search is going to show the UCC liens. It's going to show the second liens. FHA, man, they're awesome about helping people get mortgages, but they also, to bridge the gap of home ownership, to help with that down payment, they get down payment assistance, because that's not free, right? That's tacked on. That's a second mortgage. Or, during COVID, awesome. Everybody got these adjustments and loan modifications. That money didn't go away. They put that in a second mortgage on the back. So if you get a first mortgage payoff and you don't get the second mortgage payoff, you're going to be in a lot of trouble, especially if you're close on that first mortgage payoff. I'm working on one right now where they got to the closing table, and two of those things happened. There was a second mortgage that the homeowner didn't realize. And then there was also a UCC lien. He was $30,000 in debt by the time he got to closing. A seller's not going to pay that, and he shouldn't. So it should have been a short sale right away. And it's a lot harder, and it doesn't make you guys look great, even though it's not your fault when that happens. The whole situation there just kind of implodes. So yes, comps for sure. Ask the seller to get that full payoff, and then get that lien search done. That's going to prep you right there. Okay. So then the lien search comes back. You see all this stuff. You're not going to have the payoff, but you're going to know what the mortgage is. Okay. So if somebody's not paying their mortgage payment, those interest rates, and depending on how delinquent the mortgage is, attorney's fees and stuff like that, it's going to add to it. So I've seen mortgage principal balances, the borrowed amount, and even if it's just a year or two later, which you guys might see because the market changed that fast, and then you get a payoff and it's thousands of dollars higher. Foreclosure fees and late charges and all those junk fees, they add up. So be really careful not to just rely on the mortgage statement or the principal balance on that recorded mortgage that you get in the lien search. So, but it gives you a good idea. So you get the lien search back, you've pulled the comps, you have an idea of where the list price is, right? So then you do the math. Does anybody know how to quickly do that math? Like on the fly without having your little net sheet and doing all the things? Anybody know how to do that? No? I'll tell you. You are so quiet. I see all these mutes.
Listen, if I don't have my net sheet or a calculator in front of me, no one wants to trust my math.
Well, at least a calculator on your phone. I'll let you have a calculator. Okay. So let's use even numbers. So let's say that you pull the comps and you see that you're going to list this price at 200,000, right? Or in that range, 200,000. We'll use even numbers. So quickly, the easiest way to do that is subtract 7% from your list price. So that assumes, I know things are changing, that you're getting 6%, okay, in commissions. And then there's 1% of closing costs. That might be on the high side, but it's better to overestimate than underestimate. So 1% is going to cover your closing attorney fees. It's going to cover deed tax stamps for the seller side. It's going to cover taxes, all those general fees that they have to pay. And that includes your commissions. So if you take 7%, that usually works. If you know you're not going to ask for 6%, take it down to 6%. Are you asking for 5%? So do what you are going to, hopefully what your seller is going to pay, what you're going to try to go for, and then add 1% to that. Okay. So, and then do the math. So if you do 200,000, what is that? 14,000. Someone do my math for me. So subtract 14,000 from that. So that's going to leave you, I think I did this example earlier today. That's going to leave you 186,000. Okay. So that's the number. That's that magic number that you get to work with, right? So now here's the question. Your lien search came back. The mortgage amount, what they borrowed. Let's say that if it comes back and their mortgage amount's 100,000, you're golden. Okay. No matter what, they would have been foreclosed on by the time that equaled 186,000. So, it's not a short sale. You're good. You don't have anything to worry about. Let's say that the mortgage balance, what they borrowed, let's say it's like 180. That gives you $6,000 to work with. What are you going to do? What would you think you should do? Anybody? mutes all around.
The rest get a payoff. Make sure that you've got the payoff and there's no other liens.
Yeah, but this is before you've gone on the listing appointment. This is just all the homework you're doing before you see that client.
I mean, that's not a straight answer, because you've really got to ask the client at that point, what's their goal? I mean, if they're trying to buy up, or they're trying to, what do they have set aside in addition to that of where they're going next? So, I mean, 6,000, I mean, with our market today, they're really going to be looking at breaking even if there's closing costs that are being requested or repairs. So, I mean, that's really, they're really looking at a $6,000 window to be breaking even in the best case scenario.
Right. So if it's that close, you hit it, Allison, good. If it's that close, you're either looking at, because I mean, hopefully you get into a bidding war, but the market isn't really like that right now. So chances are you're going to get at your list price or probably below. So that doesn't give you a big range of error to play with, a big margin. So you're either looking at quite possibly a short sell situation or a situation where they're going to break even. And that also is a conversation you need to prepare your seller for, because if anything happens at that point, you will know when you go there, you will know, I'm going to recommend that you don't take buyers that need closing costs. That's going to affect your buyer. I'm going to recommend, so you go equipped with this knowledge. You go with this arsenal of information that maybe they didn't even know. Like, you're going to go, and if there's a UCC lien, you're going to say, hey, it looks like you had an HVAC repair. Tell me about that. And they're going to be like, wait, what? How'd you even know about that? I'm just meeting you. And you're going to say, oh, well, it's on your lien search. And they'll probably say, oh, I had no idea. So you're prepared for that. So if you've done, at that point, you would have done your net sheet and you would have seen they've got $6,000 to play with. Now, obviously, if the mortgage or all of the things on their lien search, let's say that they're short, all right? So do you guys know how to present that to a seller? Like, what do you say? What do you think you should say in that situation?
Well, I think it's discovering what their motivation is. Does it make sense for them to sell it at this time, or do their circumstances mean that they should probably sit tight for a year or two? If they're moving out of the area, maybe it's a choice of renting the property until they can escalate in value. So figuring out what their motivating factor is for the sale. And then, do they have cash in reserve to take it to the closing table if it comes down to it? Those would be my two key pieces to that. And then if they don't and they got to go, then I'm sending them to you.
Yeah. And the question is, are they willing? Like, if they're owing, or if they have about $6,000, let's say that they get to the closing table and it breaks even. Okay. Well, let's say they get to the closing table and it shorts $6,000. So do they have that money, and will they spend it on that? And should they? That's the question. So when you go on that listing appointment and you're talking about a short sale, so the things that you need to be able to hit on, if you know it's short, I mean, maybe on the call when you go, maybe they said something that kind of explained why they either want to or have to sell their property. Okay. So let's say they have to sell it. They're going through a divorce, right? And the judge has ordered the sale of the property. They have to sell it. It's not an option to keep it. And it's short. So here's where we are. You're going to go, and there's a couple of things that you want to say. And then there's a whole lot of things that you don't want to say. Okay. So you want to let them know, guys, a short sale in its most basic definition is where we're petitioning the bank to take less than what's owed on their mortgage. Okay. It happens all the time. It's been going on since before the recession. So you're going to say the negative is there are tax consequences and there are credit impacts to it. Depending on where they are, if you get that lien search and you know that they're in foreclosure, which we will talk about what in foreclosure means. But if they're in foreclosure, chances are they don't care anything about a credit impact because their credit scores are already bleeding, right? So if they're in foreclosure, it means they have rolling lates and it's just bleeding their credit at this point. So a short sell hit is actually a good thing. It stops the bleeding. You get one final hit and it's over. But you do want to say there's credit impacts, and you want to say that there are tax consequences to a short sell. So any amount that's forgiven, the IRS considers that a gift, and they will send a 1099 for that. Most homeowners are insolvent, or that's where you owe more than you're worth, or a good tax accountant or CPA can take somebody's numbers and make them work so that they don't get hit by that 1099, but it's there. Okay. That's going to be the extent of what you say, right? Anything else that you say can be construed as the unauthorized practice of law, and that's where you get in trouble. Okay. So if they have more questions, you can send them to me. Don't send them to me for CPA or financial advice, because I'm going to send them to their CPA or accountant, right? So I will never know their information the way that that person will. Credit, I can talk to them all day about credit if they have questions. If you guys have special training on credit, do that. But what I would do to protect yourselves is I would, if this is an in-person, I would reiterate that conversation to them in an email and save it in your file, just to protect you. Okay. Because people going through hardships and extreme situations tend to forget conversations and disclosures, and they remember what they want to remember. So just be really careful. Put everything that you disclose in writing, and just be careful about what you disclose. So at this point, now skipping on ahead, you know, you've gotten to the listing appointment. You know what that number needed to be. You know, you had $186,000 to play with. They gave you a mortgage statement, a mortgage payoff statement, because they did what you asked them to do. And that mortgage payoff statement says $190,000. So now you're in the hot seat. Now you got to say, guys, we are definitely in a short sell situation. If you were close, honestly, I'd still tell them about a short sell so that it's not shocking down the street. Because chances are you're not going to get a full offer. You know, so if you're within a couple of thousand, I would still say, guys, we might go in this direction. I just want to let you know. And maybe it comes in then, Roni, where they say, well, we have a couple of thousand we can bring to closing to avoid the short sell if we need to. So that's where you have that back and forth conversation. So it's a short sell. You guys have already gotten in touch with me, and you can send those clients to me. You can bring them in an email. I prefer email because it's in writing, okay? And that holds up in court. So I will disclose everything, the good and the bad and the ugly, and things they do and don't want to hear. It's all going to be in there, and they have it in writing, and they can reference back to it when they have a question. The process isn't short, so they probably will need to reference back to it. So I'll say, if you have that email from, or I'll forward it, and I'll say, see where we said this at the beginning? So at that point, you do get me involved if you haven't already gotten me involved. If you get that lien search, guys, and you know it's short when you're going on that appointment, see if you can find out who the lender is. And I'm going to equip you with a whole bunch of information, and I'm going to give you some documentation ahead of time so that when you go on that listing appointment, hopefully they hire you, you aren't piecemealing a whole bunch of documents that they have to sign. You have everything. And that would include our authorization and engagement letter, so I can immediately start talking to the bank on their behalf. Okay. So that's that whole ugly process. You've gotten through the disclosure part. They've accepted their fate that it is a short sell. Here's what happens. The documentation process isn't as bad as it used to be. I mean, they wanted a blood sample and everything else before. Now it's a lot more kind of cut and dry, whereas the banks should be pros at this. They are not. They still make a ton of mistakes, but it is a document collection. I have a checklist. I keep it super simple. You can literally go down and check off the list. Every bank requires something different. So it's pretty straightforward as far as you have to have a contract. You have to pre-qual, or the proof of funds for the buyer. There's a financial worksheet that most banks want, a hardship letter from the seller. They're going to need your listing agreement, MLS printout. We're going to have to know, is there an HOA? That's a question that you guys should be asking anyway. So make sure that you know about HOAs, and do they owe something? Get an invoice if they think they owe something. So then we collect all the documents, and then here's the good news. You guys get to go out and be agents. You don't have to babysit this short sell anymore. Okay. So that's where I come in. So I start communicating with the bank on the seller's behalf. Here's the way that you introduce us. We're an extension of your team. That's it. We're not taking over the file. We're not their agent. You guys are the agent. You get paid as the agent. You will stay involved as the agent. We are an extension of your team that you can offer to your client as free legal advice and negotiations from the beginning to the very end of closing. Who wouldn't use you, right? So, I mean, during the recession, we were like, why wouldn't you use us? Because you guys, your E&O doesn't cover you for this kind of stuff. So if you in good-hearted nature give someone advice because you think it's the right thing and you truly believe it and it's not right, not factually anyway, they can sue you. Does your E&O cover that? I can tell you right now, no, it doesn't. Okay, because that is the unauthorized practice of law. So what I will do, you guys, if you haven't done a short sale with me before, I keep you in the loop the entire time. So you get updates once a week. I will always tell you where you are in the process. Are you missing documents? I will even go so far as to bring in the buyer's agent. Now, they're not copied on personal information from the seller, of course, or anything regarding the seller. So if I say, hey, Mr. Smith, the bank is asking about this $200 deposit in your checking account, the buyer's agent's going to be taken off of that. But if it's a general update, like the bank has received the documents, they've asked us to give them 7 business days to review, my update will be on this day. So far, they don't need anything. That's great for the buyer side, because as a buyer's agent, which you guys may also be in on a short sale, sometimes it feels like these short sales go into an abyss and then nothing happens. It can feel that way because they're long. The normal process of a short sale can take anywhere from 60 to 90 business days. And that's for normal short sales. Any short sale that's got like a weird thing, or if it's backed by FHA or VA, that's going to take a little bit longer, and we'll go into why that is. So it's really important for you guys, if you're on the listing side, to keep the buyer in and to properly manage expectations. Because how many of you have been in a situation where a buyer's agent's like, what's going on? What's going on? Every 2 days. It's really annoying, and it doesn't help anybody. We're really busy. Everybody's really busy, and you're trying to run a business, and you can't babysit someone who doesn't understand the business. So that's where I come in. Those updates are going to be no less than once per week. Sometimes, depending on what's going on in the week or on the file, you'll get them multiple times a week. So that's how we can ensure the buyer side is kept up to date. The great thing is for you guys, if you're on the buyer side and I'm involved, that's going to happen. If you're on a buyer side, and I didn't used to have to make this disclosure, but in the last few years I've had to. Back during the recession, everybody knew who Weeks in Irvine was with the short sale, and we were, the only game in town that was willing to do it because it was madness. Now there's a lot of agents out there that don't know that we exist. You, as a buyer's agent, when you find out it's a short sale, can write into your contingencies, we require that Weeks in Irvine that Tommy Dinkins with Weeks in Irvine negotiate the short sale. Guys, there's no fee. There's no fee to you. There's no fee to any agent. There's no fee to the seller. So I want to make sure that you guys understand that we're the seller's legal representation and closing attorney. So the closing attorney fees will be a little bit higher, but you don't pay me separately for this. This is something Weeks in Irvine did back in January of 2009, we decided to open this division. So, and not once have we ever charged an agent. So if this ends up not being short, you don't owe us anything separate. Hopefully you'll still close with us, but you don't owe us anything. If the seller wins the lottery and they don't want to sell anymore, nobody owes us anything, right? So what you get paid by the bank, your commissions are 100% your commissions, and how you guys split that is completely up to you. So again, our fee is written in as the closing attorney fee, comes out of that 7% that we talked about at the very beginning. So as a buyer's agent on the short sale, you can completely write us in as a requirement of the short sale. Roni, do you have a question?
Yeah, so the question would be, when it is short sale, we can set our fees between agent and seller. We can set our percentages of what the transaction fees are going to be, correct? The bank is not dictating what we get paid.
Yes and no. So I will say, I know right now you guys aren't able to always get that 6%. Like before, 6% was just like the household number. Now I know it's sometimes kind of a fight to get 6%, or the seller thinks that, oh, I don't have to pay this other agent, you're only going to get 2 or 3%. In a short sale, I'm going to encourage you and your seller to write in 6% on that listing agreement, because at the end of the day, it is still up to the bank though. So most banks will honor 6%. They won't pay a dime over that though. So you can write in 9% or 7% all day long. They're not going to pay anything more than 6%. How the adjustments go, how you do those assignments, you can do 4% to the listing agent, 2% to the buyer's agent. They don't care about that. All they care about is that big number, 6%. They're not going to pay more than that. There are some situations where they pay less. So if it's like the jumbo loans, they very rarely pay 6%. Usually they'll cut you down to 5%. There's some private investors out there that will cut you down to 5%. Government investors, Fannie, Freddie, FHA, VA, USDA, they all honor 6%. So I can usually tell you guys that at the very beginning, but if it were me, especially when you're going on that listing appointment, if you know it's short, you better write in 6%. Don't undercut yourself on that. So that's a great question. It's kind of a yes and no though, Roni. It's like you do get to dictate what it is, but then the bank has the final say.
Final authority. Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
And on that, I'll say that's the same with the fees. So guys, if it ends up being short, the bank's not going to go paying all this junk stuff. So they're going to really scrutinize closing costs. They will not pay closing costs on cash buyers. So don't even think about it. And then 3% is going to be the max. If they pay 3%, they will not pay a home warranty. All short sales are as is transactions. So that's actually going to be on an addendum that I tell you to get, that all short sales are as is. That doesn't mean that the buyer can't get an inspection and appraisal and all that stuff. It means that the bank is not going to pay for or reimburse for any repairs. And so obviously, if it's a short sale, neither is the actual seller. You would never ask a seller in a short sale to pay for a repair. They're already in the hole. They're already taking a loss based on their original purchase, their down payment, the money they've paid, and the mortgage payments from beginning to now. So in a short sale, repairs and reimbursement for repairs are off the table. And then again, the bank will not reimburse for that no matter what. Now, if there are repairs needed, the buyer or the buyer's agent can write their offer accordingly. Okay. So if let's say that the home is $200,000 based on comps, but you go in and like all of the carpets just reek of urine. I'm sorry to be graphic, but it's, it's a situation where you can't live with it. You can't clean it. Maybe they had a whole bunch of cats or something and you got to rip it up. So you can adjust that. Now you can't go in adjusting at $30,000. That's not what carpet is. They're going to be commercial grade, basic carpet. That will be part of it. Here's why. The bank's going to get their own valuation to determine what fair market value is. So it's not like a crapshoot. It's not like a guess. The bank's going to do their homework too. So with that, unless there are questions, I'm going to take you through what happens on the back end. You guys ready? Yeah.
Well, I just have a quick question, Tony. So what is the best way for us to is it disclosed on the property disclosure that it's a short sale? Is it disclosed? How is the best legal way to protect ourselves? And if we know it's a short sale going into it,
Yeah.
Where is that written in on the listing agreement or property disclosure?
Yes. So there is, I'll tell you, in the MLS, there's a place where you can put potential short sales. So you definitely want to put that in there. What I used to say is these 3 disclosures. I've changed it here with this compensation thing happening now. So the 3 things I used to say, if you knew you were going into a short sale listing, in the MLS, you're going to put potential short sale. I mean, miracles happen and maybe it won't be a short, but it is a potential short sale and you know it. So I would put that in there. I would put somewhere in the notes negotiated by Weeks in Irvine or Tommy Dinkins or Tommy Dinkins with Weeks in Irvine, so that they know that you're not trying to Forrest Gump your way through the transaction. And then, because a lot of buyers agents know, like they're like, I don't even know how to do a short sale. Who's this agent? Or if they're an experienced agent and they see us, then they know us, then they know that it's going to be handled efficiently. So you're going to put that in there. The third thing I used to say to put in there is that commissions to be split 50-50 per bank approval. That's not how it is anymore, just recently. So I would leave the commission talk out of it, but somewhere in that compensation agreement, you want to say based on bank approval. So whatever you decide it is with your seller, you need to say based on bank approval, because the seller could say, sure, I'll pay 5. And then you can say, okay, I'm going to take 3% and give the other agent 2%. That's fine, but it needs to say based on bank approval, because if the bank cuts you to 4 for whatever reason, then that other agent's still going to get 2 because you've written that in there. You see, so if you say based on bank approval, what you might want to say is percentages. So you might want to say 60% to listing agent, 40% to buyer's agent, or however you guys want to disclose it that you feel good about, but always put commissions based on bank approval. Okay. And again, I wouldn't put that in the listing anymore because it's the world has changed. So that's a great question. That's where I disclose it. In the listing, there are listing addenda that are out there that you can put that in. You can also put it in your contingencies. With contracts, when they come in, there are short sale addenda that are out there. There's the generic 2-page one that you can use. Banks will also have their own version depending on who the bank is. So once we know, I can send you guys that as well. Somewhere in the contract, you need to put this is an as-is transaction. A lot of short sale addenda will say it's as is, but if it doesn't, I'll put that in there just to make sure that they understand that. So that's a great question. You want to disclose that. I'd start right away with the listing with the MLS. Yeah, Ernest.
Question: does the bank have to approve the short sale? I know it seems like they used to have to approve the amount. So if we go on a listing and we know it's doing the math roughly, we know, hey, they owe more. They're going to owe more. They're going to be upside down on the transaction.
Right.
Should we start the short sale process before we get a contract on it so that we can figure out what the bank will take, or how does that work? How do I list that?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? I wish they would do it that way. They don't. Some of them will, most of them won't until you have an offer. Here's why: it costs them money. So, to do things like the valuations and to get it into their loss mitigation department, all that stuff costs them money on the back end. They don't want to spend money until they know they're going to get money. You know what I mean? Plus, if they do, so they'll either do a BPO or a full appraisal, depending on who the investor is. And full appraisals cost the same thing for the banks as they do for you and I. So they're not going to spend that money until they know that there's an offer in place. BPOs are a lot less expensive, which is why they use those, but those still cost the bank money. And BPOs are only good for about 60 to 90 days. Appraisals are only good for about 4 to 6 months, depending on what kind of appraisal they do. So they also don't want to spend the money again if they don't have to. Now, you can get the process started ahead of time, but only a handful of situations will they, I'd say if you have 10 short sales, maybe 2 to 3 of them, they'll get a valuation ahead of time. The other 7, they'll wait for that contract to come in. So great question, but unfortunately, no, we can't oftentimes get that pre-listing price to go in there. So it's just kind of a guess until we can get it submitted. Some government-backed short sales like FHA will do the valuation, but then that's only if they're not in foreclosure. Sometimes if they're in foreclosure, they'll already have a back-end valuation. It's how they know what they're going to foreclose on it for. So you get lucky in some situations where you can get an idea of what the list price is, but in general, don't bank on that. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess because it seems like if using your example of 200 is where the comps were, if I go to list it at 200, but then I'm putting in the MLS or wherever that it's a short sale, seems like I'm asking Ricardo when he comes with his buyer to shoot it low just because he can.
Yeah. No, and so let's talk about that. That's actually a good segue into the next little bit. So here's how you know how to not only list it. I have a lot of agents that think, well, it's already short. What does it matter? They want to sell it quickly. No, they don't. No. And cash buyers don't matter versus finance buyers. You would think cash buyers would be king because they can close faster. No, cash buyers want a deal because they think they're special. If it's a regular transaction, maybe they are. Finance buyers will pay full fair market value. That's what the bank wants, and they'll wait long enough to get it. So they don't care whether it's a cash buyer or not. What I will tell you is investor buyers back in the recession were buying up all these short sales because the banks were giving them away, right? They had more than they knew what to do with. They'd get to foreclosure and they'd have to buy them back because there weren't any buyers at the foreclosure sale. So they had stock and inventory that they didn't want. So they would pretty much take anything. That is not the way it is now. So investor buyers looking for a deal, I mean, if they want a couple of $1,000s to walk into, maybe they'll get a little deal, but they're not going to walk into what they used to. That those days are in the past. So you still need an offer that's reasonable to fair market value. You know what I mean? And that's the as is fair market value though. So you guys are good enough to know if you go into the house and it's a mess, like you walk in, you're like, oh, okay, I might need to sign a waiver to walk in here. Then, okay, you might need to adjust the list price a little bit because of that. And if a buyer comes in, you just tell them if they want to undershoot the price, you say, okay, well, you're going to have to put your money where your mouth is. You're going to have to prove to us why this offer is where it is, because the bank's going to do their own appraisal. They're going to do their own valuation. So with that said, let's kind of skip ahead here because that was a great segue, Ernest. So we're going to collect all the documentation. I'm going to help you guys with that. I literally look at every single piece of paper, every single number that's disclosed. I audit everything before it goes to the bank so that we're representing the seller in the best possible light. You know, sellers just throw stuff on there. They send back a financial worksheet. They don't include half of their monthly liabilities, and they're showing a surplus monthly of $5,000. Well, that's not a hardship. Like what? Give me some money, you know? So we got to work on the documentation first. So when you go on that listing appointment, it is never too late to start the documentation process. That's why you get me in when you know it's a short sale. So start the documentation process. Let's say we have everything, right? We've gotten to that point where we have everything. We'll get it submitted ahead of time, or let's say in that whole time frame you get an offer too. Great, even better. We'll submit the offer, the pre-qual, the listing, all the financials that we need for this seller. We'll get it submitted. So guys, the normal short sale, I'm going to say this again. If you have a buyer that's walking into your short sale listing that is going to be homeless in 30 days, that's not your buyer. Okay, it's just not your buyer. I know that you really want that buyer. I know the seller really wants that buyer, but they're going to make your lives miserable. They're going to make my life miserable. And I'm going to tell them day one, when I see that contract and the closing date's 30 days out, I'm going to immediately write everybody back and say, we need to push out this closing date. So don't take that buyer. Now, if they're willing to wait, they've got 60 to 90 business days, not calendar days, business days. So that's creeping more like into the 90 to 120, right? So just say 60 to 90 business days is what you need to prepare for. They've got that time to wait. Let's go. We haven't submitted. Now, can it happen sooner? Sure. I've had short sale approvals come back in 2 weeks. They're not often, but they come back. I've had them come back in 30 days, 60 days or less. I've got one right now that's about to be approved. It was 90 calendar days, just under. So, but you need to disclose 60 to 90 business days so that you don't create unrealistic goals. So it's submitted. Here's what's happening on the back end. The bank's going to assign a negotiator to your file. And then that negotiator is going to go through and audit the file. There may or may not be an additional underwriter they go through. They're looking for red flags in the seller's file. They're not even looking at the buyer yet. They're looking through the seller's documents to see if they even qualify for a short sale. They're looking for the hardship. They're looking for lies, honestly. Like if they come back and they don't have any credit card debt and they've got an 800 credit score and everything's peachy, they're going to start asking questions. Sadly, the worse their situation looks, the better. If they've been paying the mortgage on time, they don't necessarily like that. There's no risk to them. Why approve a short sale and take a loss immediately? They're going to bank on this seller being able to pay the mortgage. Now, does that mean you tell the seller to go late? No, you never say that, but they are going to question the hardship. So just kind of know that. So they're going to look at all of the finances and then they're going to determine, let's say that it's not late, but let's say that it's a court ordered situation like a divorce. Okay, well, that's your hardship. You know, let's say that you have a VA seller who just got transfer papers. That's a hardship, you know? So it doesn't have to be that financial hardship. It could be mandated for some other reason, and that's still considered a hardship. So it's in there. They qualify the seller. What they do next is they're going to move over to that property, and they're going to say, okay, what's our asset worth? That's when they're going to start doing their due diligence. They also do a lien search on the back end. They also check title. They also get that valuation done. So if it's a government-backed short sale like FHA or VA, they're going to get a full FHA or VA appraisal. So it's, again, I mean, if you guys have ever been through a situation with a VA appraiser, just know, I mean, who knows what they're going to come back with? You know, they're very, very conservative. So what we don't want is that appraisal to come back significantly higher than where our offer is. And what we really don't want is for that appraisal to come back significantly higher than your starting list price. And so that's going to take us back to where you started. Okay. Your list price has got to be at fair market value. And that's why. Not at the beginning when you think, well, it's short anyway, let's just get them out of this hardship. They're really stressed and I want to help them out. No, because the bank is going to go, well, we have a valuation of 200,000. Why did they start this list price at 180,000? What's your reason? You don't have one. You were trying to sell it. Yeah, Ricardo.
All right, so I'm just trying to understand and make sure that, trying to make sure I'm understanding it right. You have somebody who has a house that's worth $400,000, but they owe, $370 on it. They just went through a divorce. They're going through some hardships and everything. We get them in contact with you. You go through all the liens, the lien search, and I'm just trying to see, is this something that we stumble upon and somebody get in contact with us because they're going through the hardships and they need to sell their house and they don't have any choice, or they're going to lose the house and go to foreclosure? At what process? And because we're not going to be marketing ourselves to these people in hardships because we don't want to take advantage, or they're not going to be able to pay you or pay the buyer. We're just trying to help them out to get to you. Right.
No, you're still the listing agent. If the house sells, and we only work with sellers. I mean, if they want to keep their home, that's a loan mod. I mean, I can them down that road, but we don't do that for them. So you have to be an agent. I'm not an agent. I don't want to be an agent. You're the agent.
Yeah. No, yeah, but I mean, like they just need your help in order to get them through this short sale because they have no choice. They need to sell the house. They just went through a divorce, or spouse died or something.
I'll kind of speak up to that because I lived through this back in 08, 09, 2010. There's some agents' business models to run their full business on short sales and foreclosures. So now they also essentially went out of business and after the market recovered, they had to change their business model a bit. But no, Ricardo, there's agents that specialize in helping navigate these, just as Tommy does on the legal side. There's agents that help clients. Now, will you find yourself positioned in front of somebody one day that wants to sell, needs to sell, and but the numbers are playing into the realm that they are going to be up short? And then it's, well, what do I do next? Right? They don't have any idea. And the whole mindset in this of getting ahead of that conversation is to learn what your steps and what your advice is going to be. Because I do believe, if you stay in business long enough, you're going to be sitting in front of somebody that is going to have to be advised on this. So
and you still get paid. Don't walk away from it.
Yeah, you get paid.
It's just not immediate gratification. Like if it's A to B and there's equity and everybody's happy, then great. But that's not how they all are going to be. They still close. You still get paid. Your commissions are just slightly delayed. You got to wait for the process. The important thing is, I mean, you could try to run it on your own. I don't recommend it, but the important thing is you don't have to do anything extra. You just have to wait a little bit longer. It is important though that you represent yourself in a way where you're different than other agents. You're better because you're equipped, you have answers, and you have a direction, and you have a team that can expertly help them get to the finish line of this thing. It's kind of crazy. Like during the recession, there was so much information, not at the beginning, again, it was the Wild Wild West, but there was so much information about all these things that homeowners could do to avoid foreclosure. Because again, the banks did not want the property back. Now there's not as much information. So even back then, when there was just so much information, consumers were still very naive about the whole thing. Now there's even less information out there. It's not as prevalent as it was. And so you can believe that a lot of sellers have no idea what to do. They think they should just let it foreclose. And there's a better way. You know, well, loan mod if they want to keep it. Short sell is the second best thing. Deed in lieu before foreclosure is the third. Foreclosure is the very last thing. I mean, that's going to crucify you for years on your credit. So for that situation, I don't know if your business model, like Roni says, should be market to the but is it going to come upon your desk if you stay in the business long enough? I'm going to bet yes, it will. And if it doesn't end up being short, it's going to be calls for pause. You're going to be close, especially right now with what's been happening. We're in election year. Charleston's crazy about election years. So yeah, so how you market yourself and where you market yourself, maybe you want to stay away from them. I wouldn't, I wouldn't.
Well,
still going to get paid.
yeah, and then there's 13 short sales on our MLS right now that are sitting active. So if you've got a buyer that likes that, just being to understand what that process looks like, and ask that listing agent, where are you in the process and what legal team are you working with? Because if they don't have one, then that's a red flag for everybody that would be involved, right?
So here's the question. Thanks for saying that, Roni. Here's the question I would ask if it were me. If I was a buyer's agent and I'm going on a listing appointment or trying to show my buyer who is okay, they're not in a rush. They want the house. They love it. They want it. I'm going to ask that listing agent, if they don't have somewhere in the notes that they're working with someone, ask them who the investor is on the loan. If they don't know, you need to write us into that contract if your buyer wants to do it. Here's why. Okay, so let's Bank of America. Everybody knows Bank of America. So Bank of America is just a servicer. They don't own the paper, right? If this is like a Fannie or a Freddie or a privately backed mortgage and not FHA or VA, and that's a little bit different. So there are thousands of investors out there that buy these bulk notes, right, in bundles, and they just buy and sell on the back end, and it's stuff that we never even know about. Who they're writing their check to is just the servicing lender. So let's say Bank of America, that's the Bank of America's the puppet. There's a hand up there, right, that's dictating what the puppet does. That's the investor. Okay. They make all the rules. So you got to know, is this Fannie or Freddie? Is this FHA or VA? Is this USDA? Is this a private investor? Do they know? Now, if they say private investor, okay, you're not always going to know that. There's Bank of Mellon, Bank of New York. There's so many out there. That doesn't matter, but that it's a private investor, that does matter. So if they don't know the answer to that and they say they're the one negotiating it, I would either run or I would write us into the contract. And again, we're free. So if we're not already in it, it's probably because they don't know about us, that would be my suggestion. Not to toot our own horn, but we've done thousands and thousands of these. Okay, so I'm going to circle back then to that valuation so that you can understand. And that also kind of makes you see now why the buyer's offer is important. So if the buyer wants to come below, let's say that you've run the numbers, the home is in decent shape, there's no major repairs, you listed at 200,000, you truly believe in your professional opinion that it's worth 200,000. Let's say a buyer comes in, they don't want closing costs or any junk, but they don't want to pay more than 185, 190. Okay, you can counter them, and if that's the best that they would do, I'd say that's probably close enough to get it submitted, to at least get the process started. If nothing else, the bank's going to order their value. And then going back to what Ernest said, that's going to get us what their list price is going to be then. So let's say that we get it submitted and it's in there. The bank comes back and their value is at 200,000. So your list price was on the money. Great. They don't question your list price at all. The buyer's offer is 185. They will counter that buyer again. So sometimes we know what the net proceeds figure is that they want. Sometimes we don't know. They can sometimes tell us, sometimes they won't. So at that point, that list price and that buyer's offer is going to come into play right there. Make sense? So everybody kind of see why where you start is super important. You're not going to give this property away. Don't undersell it. That listing history is really, really important. Okay. They are also at this point going to look at the fees on that settlement statement that I send to them. And they're either going to check it off or they're not. If there's something like a UCC lien on title, which we're going to put on there and try to get them to pay it. Let's say they're not paying their mortgage, so they also weren't paying the HOA. We're going to put that HOA balance on there and try to get the bank to pay it. Sometimes they will, sometimes they won't. So that's where the pieces, the Tetris pieces start coming together. And then we're in a lot of communication then. So then it's not just generic once a week updates. It's okay, they're cutting this, this, and this. Here's where we are on commissions. Here's where we are on fees. We need to counter this, etc. So you're at the end of the process right now. Best case scenario, they will approve it and settle the balance or settle the deficiency. Here's what that means. To settle a deficiency balance, and then I'm going to go into foreclosures, guys, because I want you guys to understand the process in South Carolina. So to settle the balance is the one that we go for. That's the one that I'm going to really push for when I do negotiations. It means that they are willing to take the offer, whatever it is, when we get to the bottom line. They take the offer, the net proceeds, and whatever that deficiency is. Let's say that the home is worth $200,000. Let's say they owe $250 on it. Let's say the bank nets $200,000. There's $50,000 deficiency there. So what happens with that deficiency is what we want to know about. A settled short sell means that they are waiving their rights to pursue that deficiency. That's what you want. Now that's where that tax consequence comes in. So now they are going to write that off to the IRS. The IRS is going to look at that like a gift, and they're going to send that homeowner a 1099 for that balance. Okay, so they need to know that. So, but the good news is the bank is not going to pursue them anymore. Here's the bad news. The state of South Carolina does allow them to pursue the consumer. So some banks are almost always going to pursue the consumer. The big banks, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, those guys, $50,000 is a drop in the bucket for them. The small banks, the credit unions, they're going to come after you. Okay, so that $50,000, they might approve the deal because it does prove that it's at the value it needs to be. But they're going to say, hey, we agree to take this, but we're only going to release our lien from title. We're not going to release the seller. We want the seller to participate in this loss. They can ask that. And they won't approve it unless the seller participates in it. So a released approval is nowhere near as good as a settled approval. Just kind of know that we will be there to disclose that. If it's a credit union, I have disclosed that already months ago when we started the process. Okay, so that's why knowing who the lender is and knowing who the investor is on the loan is super important. If it's FHA, VA, USDA, there's different underwriting guidelines, but they're guaranteed a settlement. It's really nice to know from a seller's perspective 3 months ago that at the end, once it's all said and done, they'll be done with this. Okay, so those are all really important things. So once you get to the end, hopefully we get that settled approval. What happens is the approval letter gets sent out to everybody. It gets moved into the closing, and then it closes like normal magic. But that's like, 60 to 90 days from when you started. So as agents, you've done a little bit of extra homework at the beginning. You've done your normal work in the middle, and then you get to do the normal work at the end, right? Are there any questions about that so far?
I guess the question I've got is, what if the client, I'm just thinking they've been paying PMI.
Mhm.
What is the purpose of that if they're going to come after them for the $50,000 or whatever?
So PMI is paid to the bank. It's not paid to the seller or to the owner of the property. So that's the
Right.
insurance for loaning money on a consumer or a situation that is risky.
Right. So if I paid the bank this PMI for 5 years or whatever, why I've got an insurance policy in case it defaults. Why would they come after me, the seller? I'm not saying it is me, but me, the seller, for the difference.
So the bank is now, will they come after the seller or not? Who knows with PMI?
Right.
But what the bank thinks in that situation oftentimes is that they gave you the mortgage. You wouldn't have gotten the mortgage because you were a risky borrower. You have a risky credit score, or we gave you a better interest rate than we could have or should have. So they're going to change some things, and they're going to say, we gave you this loan. That's why we had PMI on this, to protect us, not to protect you. Local bank, yeah, you gotta love a financial institution, right? We made some wrong decisions. I would be Bank of America if I had made better decisions. So with the local banks, for example, a lot of times they write their own paper. Like
Right.
Bank of America is going to write the paper of Fannie Mae, right? Whereas the credit union down the street, they can do the funky stuff. Like, have you ever had to get a loan for a borrower who's buying a house that's got an HOA in litigation? Nobody's touching that except a
Right.
local. You know what I
Right.
mean? So the great thing about the local banks, they're super competitive with interest rates. They can write the funky stuff that the big banks don't do. But with that said, on the back end, they're going to get their money back. Those are shareholders
Right.
that, big banks are just going to write off that debt. The small banks, the credit unions, those are individual shareholders that are losing money, and they're not going to let you walk away on that.
Yeah.
So PMI got the loan for you, doesn't get you out of it. Kind of the way they think about it. But that's a great question. Anybody else before we jump into like how foreclosures work in our state? No.
I
So
just have a quick question. I'm sorry.
oh,
Uh, what happens if let's say we start out at 200,000. We're in a downshifting market.
Mhm.
You know, now we're having to reduce the price, and then things come up after we're already under contract.
Mhm.
We then just alert everybody what's happening and then start the process for the short sale? How does that, like, if it shifts during the course of contract?
Yeah, so that's actually a great question. I've got a couple files like that right now where they marketed it for a couple of months. Nothing was happening at the list price they needed to clear the mortgage and at least break even. So they, the writing started to become very clear on the wall as the days passed that it was becoming a short sale. And that's when they reached out to us. So I think at first, those particular agents, several of them were new. They had no idea we existed. And then they probably talked to their broker in charge or something and they panicked, like, we can't pay this mortgage anymore if I take the price down. And then they got to me. So, but really where they started the list price, they had like a cushion, like a $20,000 cushion. It was just over what the market was going to pay. So as it came down, then they started to realize I'm in trouble here. So yeah, if that happens, you already have the arsenal now of the next answer. So the great thing is you're just got a whole bunch of things in your tool belt. You're a great listing. You know how to take the listing. You know how to market the listing. You know how to go to them and say, here's where your house is. And you're just, an awesome agent for them. Then when you've done your best and the market just won't acknowledge it, you can pull something else out of your tool belt. Okay, guys, here's where we are. You knew a month ago that we were going to break even. So at this point, it's not any love lost that you're not getting a $20,000 check at closing. You knew you weren't going to walk away with any money. We got to change things now. We're now going to dip below what you owe, and this is the way we're going to sell it. And here's the way we're going to do it. Yeah, so you can absolutely start changing it. You can tweak your listing notes and add potential short sale in there. You would have gotten in touch with me. By then, you would have already had the payoff statement. So we might just update that. And we'll start the documentation with your seller at that time. So at any time, you can pull us into this. Did that answer it for you?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. So another question I get a lot is, the seller told me the house is in foreclosure. So most of the time they don't have a lien search done yet. They've only just been talking to the seller. They don't know where they are in the process. And they say, it's in foreclosure. Will I have enough time to sell it? Okay. Let me explain to you the foreclosure process. Does anybody know how foreclosures work in our state? Do you guys want a little Cliff's Notes of it? So the state of South Carolina is not great to consumers in the fact that we're a recourse state, which makes it where creditors can come after you, right? So they can still ask for repayment of that deficiency we just talked about. The positive is the state of South Carolina is very antiquated in their processes, and everything has to be perfectly aligned for anything to happen legally in that regard. And that is a benefit to the seller in some ways not. So here's what happens. Before a foreclosure attorney can even be contacted, the mortgage has got to be 120 days late. So that's 4 months of non-payment there. So at this time, the seller's got 4 months of rolling payments. That first payment that they missed becomes 30 days late. And that rolls into 60 days late when the second month goes 30. And then that first month goes 90, the second month goes 60, and then the third month goes 30. So you can see their credit is bleeding at this point. So like I said, by the time you talk to them about a short sale, they do not care anymore. So 4 months into non-payment, the bank is going to reach out to their representation. That's the foreclosure attorney, whoever it is. Most of them are out of Columbia right now. So they're going to reach out to their foreclosure attorney and they're going to start the foreclosure process. You will not find that on a lien search. It's not there yet. Okay. So this is where those questions that Roni was talking about at the beginning start. You know, where are you with your mortgage payments? If you know there's some kind of hardship, they're kind of bouncing around on the facts a little bit, ask them straight out. Are your mortgage payments on time? Is your HOA payment on time? It's part of it. So 120 days into it, the bank has reached out to the foreclosure attorney and the foreclosure attorney sends the letter to the consumer. It's snail mail, guys. It's not anything formal. It's the letter that says, hey, Mr. Smith, we've been contacted by your bank, Bank of America. They've let us know that you're this many months behind. Here's the arrears of what you owe. Here are your options. And that list is going to be loan mod, short sale, deed in lieu. The last one's foreclosure, and they're going to list them out. So they legally have to tell the consumer, hey, you're not doomed here, guys. You got lots of options. Let's talk about it. They have to give a consumer at least 30 days to respond to that letter, and their contact information is on there and everything. So they have to give them at least 30 days. They usually give them more because, again, that one is snail mailed, right? So at this point, your homeowner is at least 5 months delinquent on their mortgage payment, right? So then nothing happens. The seller has ghosted the foreclosure attorney. They've ghosted the bank. They're not responding to anybody. Then what happens is the bank is going to file for the lease pendants. That's what you guys have probably heard about. Once lease pendants are filed, that is public record that will show up on your lien search. Okay. So that means they're at least 6 months behind on their mortgage payment at that point. Lease pendants are filed. They have a docket number. That's how you find them on the county website. So at that point, they will be served their lease pendants. So someone from the court or a police officer will go to their house or their last known address, and someone has to sign for that. There is a process that if they can't find someone to sign and they do a couple of other things, that takes longer, but eventually they will pass over that someone has acknowledged receipt of this legal document, and then they will proceed from there. So let's say they were able to serve Mr. Smith, showed up at the house, Mr. Smith opened the door and signed for it. So from the date of that signature, it's another 30 days for a response to those lease pendants. So you're at 6 to 7 months right now, guys. So then nothing happens. Mr. Smith doesn't do anything. And so they're going to send Mr. Smith a notice that says, hey, you have a hearing date. And that hearing date is 30 days from the date of that letter. Okay, now you're at 7 to 8 months. You guys follow me here? This is why during the recession, people were living in their homes for 2+ years without making a mortgage payment. So then at the hearing, guys, you want them to show up. So if you take a client and let's say they say, hey, by then Mr. Smith starts to panic. He's been contacted for 7 months and nothing wakes him up, but now he's got a hearing date and he's asked to show up somewhere, and now he's finally taking the bank seriously. So he contacts you in a panic. You still have time, but here's what you do. You get that home on the market as quickly as you can. If you can go with your seller, great. If you can't, you require Mr. Smith to go to that hearing. And they're going to give Mr. Smith an opportunity to stand up and talk. There's going to be a representative from the bank. There's going to be a judge there. And hopefully Mr. Smith is there. And Mr. Smith is going to say, guys, here was my hardship situation. I'm in an active listing right now. We're trying to sell the house. It looks like it's going to be a short sale. We've done this, this, and this. Maybe we're involved. We're working with the attorneys Weeks in Irvine and Charleston, blah, blah, blah. That judge, 90% of the time, is going to hold off on scheduling a foreclosure sale date. Okay. If you just show up and show an effort. So let's say Mr. Smith still doesn't care. He doesn't show up for the hearing. At the hearing, they will determine a foreclosure sale date. They will send that notice to Mr. Smith. That is no less than 30 to 45 days after that. Guys, you're at 10 months. So I promise you, you have time. Here's when you don't have time. When you contact me and say, I've got a seller who's foreclosing on Monday, I'm going to say no. They're not going to open a short sale. They might open a loan mod, what I would say is the two options at that point is for then the seller to beg for a loan mod, and they might pull that foreclosure the last minute, or file bankruptcy. If you have an offer that you know will pay the mortgage in full, we can try like hell to get the foreclosure attorney to speak to the foreclosure department with the bank. We can try to save it. But the two things I recommend: file bankruptcy, even if you don't go through the whole thing, or try a loan mod and get them to pull that sale. So again, you gotta love the state of South Carolina for that. What's not great is that's 10 months of rolling lates for your seller. Again, their credit is destroyed at this point. So they don't care about that credit conversation you have with them, but you need to have it anyway. Yes? So questions. Do we have questions? How are we doing here? Did I scare you? Or are you guys ready? Do you feel empowered, or you feel like I'm going to stay away from it?
This is great. Well, we do want to stay away from it, I think, but at least we're equipped when it is presented.
Yeah, they close, guys. Don't be afraid of them. Don't walk away from them, because you're walking away from money. And I will tell you this, people aren't in hardships forever. I mean, raise your hand if you've been in a hardship and you're no longer in a hardship. You know what I mean? Right. Every single person, probably. So that person, you're the person that they remember. You're the person that helped them. They will never forget your name ever until the day that they die. Right? You will be a referral source until the day that person dies. So be the valuable person that can't be replaced. Be irreplaceable. You know what I mean? Ernest, go ahead, bud.
Question. I know we worked on one a few years back, and then, like you said, they don't forget you. So
Yeah.
the guy left, moved, and then he sends me this message, or calls and sends a message also, that I owe him money. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he said, you didn't help me get I was told that I should get $1,500 or $3,000, whatever the crazy number he threw out, for turning in my keys. I said, that's between you and your bank.
Yeah.
And we kind of stopped from there. But is that something banks do?
So, and I hate that happened to you. That's the sickening part of the world. I have two dogs. I don't know if you can see one of them's back there. I sometimes refer dogs over people because of that kind of situation. What I'll tell you is, FHA, depending on the circumstances, does sometimes still offer money in a short sale. VA will sometimes offer money in a short sale. That depends on the circumstances, though. Like, are they paying late HOAs, right? Are they paying a whole bunch of stuff that they wouldn't normally pay? Or is it just a cut and dry situation? Homeowner still lives in the home. It's a normal hardship situation. They don't have a string of debtors following them that they have to pay out of the net proceeds. So, and there's something that used to be out there called cash for keys, where it was like an agreed upon deed in lieu. That seller read an article somewhere that didn't apply to him.
Right.
So, guys, back in the Wild Wild West, they were giving $20,000 to people to do a short sale. It was crazy. They were giving $10,000. Some banks were giving tons of money to people just to short sell. You know, it was crazy. So there are still some investors out there that have that. It's like relocation assistance is what it is, that do that. They're not as prevalent as they used to be. But that guy read something and didn't realize he wasn't applicable.
Well, he was a deadbeat anyways.
He
I mean,
wasn't
in more ways
applicable.
than one.
I'm sorry that happened. Ernest.
Yeah, we didn't even know it was short sale. We had it listed, and he wouldn't change the price. And then all of a sudden we get an offer and find out that the guy's behind on his payments.
Wait,
And so it became a short sale. It
okay.
was ready to get foreclosed on. He hadn't
Yeah.
paid payments in a year.
And then he wants
Yeah.
cash for his keys.
Yeah, like, give me a break.
Yeah, that's
So,
but most of the time people are super grateful and they remember you in a positive way, not a negative way.
So we are going to have to wrap up here. And was there any last, we could have a discussion on this topic for hours, right? I mean, Tommy, you've been in business with Weeks in Irvine and specializing in this. The nice thing is that we have you as a resource.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And Mark Weeks is a tremendous resource as a closing attorney as well. So, you know, I think we're leaving probably still with questions. We will always have questions, and it's nice that we've got you that we can turn to, at least here in South Carolina. If somebody watches this outside of the state, then, you know, that'll be something that they hopefully will have a contact for in their region. But nonetheless, if they're South Carolina, do you cover the state, Tommy? Okay.
the whole
So
state.
anyone in South Carolina, do you cover any other states other than here?
We can help assist in some ways for other states. It gets a little hairy though. The reason why we can do what we do and we're proud of what we do is because we don't charge anybody to do it. In order to do that, we have to act as the seller's legal representation, so that their closing attorney. And because we're not licensed in like the state of North Carolina, we can't act as their closing attorney. So then there are fees involved. So we don't even, I mean, we don't market ourselves like this anyway. It just kind of finds us. But in those states, we don't like the idea of taking money from agents or sellers who are already in a hardship situation. So if they want advice, I'm full of it. But as far as actually handling it hands-on, we stay away from it because we don't want to charge people.
Sure, sure.
And
Well,
there, guys. So feel free to email me if you have a specific situation, or if you have something that comes up, save the email and shoot me a message. I'll get back to you and I'll tell you everything I know about your situation.
well, you've been a tremendous wealth of information for us. Hopefully we don't find ourselves in the discussions or in the negotiations on these, but chances are we will at some time. So at least we have some knowledge behind where we can help our clients, because that's ultimately we're trying to help the public from a legal standpoint in regards to what you do, and from a licensed real estate professional standpoint over here. So nonetheless, well, thank you. And your contact information is there should anybody need it. And just appreciate all of your time and wisdom in this.
My pleasure, guys. I look forward to hearing from you soon. Okay.
Thank you, Tommy. It was amazing.
Thanks, Tommy.
Thank you, guys. Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, guys.